Hi there, everybody. Thanks for being here. Today's presentation is on compassion fatigue and burnout. I'm your presenter, Camille Hereth. I've been a counselor for about a decade, working mostly in social services with women and families in high risk. I was a foster home licensor for 5 years, a foster parent for several years, and have three of my own kids. I'm also a trauma-informed caregiver specialist for the Alliance. I'm so glad to be here. These are the different things we're going to talk about today. We're going to first identify what compassion fatigue is versus burnout and secondary trauma. We're going to do a secondary stress test and talk about what stress does to our bodies. How does it impact it? We're going to loop in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, talk about how to resource ourselves. We have a worksheet to help with that, and then how to know when to reach out for professional help. So I want you to be thinking about what is the difference between compassion fatigue, burnout, and secondary trauma, and do you think there is a difference between those things? And I have some questions peppered throughout this, and in the interest of protecting privacy, I'll pose those questions, but save calling you out to answer them until the end. If you leave a comment throughout, I will respond to the chat though. So, and when I give presentations, I try to factor in all the different learning styles. So I do tend to read from the slides, and then I'll also just expand on that. So we first want to look at what is compassion fatigue. It's a state of tension, heightened arousal, has a rapid onset, can be felt after even one singular experience of absorbing traumatic information or seeing some type of traumatic event. So the biggest distinction, though, is that we are feeling it in our bodies and it's happening very quickly after a very specific thing. The medical definition of compassion fatigue, according to the Webster's Dictionary, is the physical and mental exhaustion and emotional withdrawal experienced by those who care for sick or traumatized people or an extended period of time. So primarily the caregivers, first responders, apathy or indifference towards the suffering of others as a result of overexposure to tragic news stories and images and the subsequent appeals for assistance. So that's another component of an indicator of the compassion fatigue occurring. Historically, compassion fatigue has happened to those who are identified as the helpers. After COVID, it was arguable that anyone could have compassion fatigue from all the different world events that we have seen change and occur since that time, since 2020. So the compassion fatigue is rapid onset. Burnout is different. That's something that can happen over the course of time. It can be a gradual buildup as the work-related attributes pile up. And not just work-related, like for first responders, but also for caregivers like yourself. It's caused by everyday stress, dealing with insurance companies, making treatment choices. Compassion fatigue results from taking on the emotional burden of a patient's agony. Tim Jarvis, an expert in this field, that's a quote from him. It presents as apathy or indifference towards the suffering of others as a result of overexposure to tragic news stories and images. And again, that appeals for assistance. So for caregivers, this example of insurance companies making treatment choices. So you're doing those things, but overexposure is going to be from things like reading the trauma history of a child or hearing about having to make decisions, like that decision fatigue that happens from what kind of counseling are we going to do? What kind of treatment are we going to do? Are we going to do this school or that school? Are we going to, you're having to make decisions all the time. Some people can even get burnout from the constant text messages coming in, the constant phone calls they're having to take, those everyday things that just happen over and over and over again that really start to take a toll on your function. And then we want to look at secondary trauma, which is also known as vicarious trauma. It's the effects that compassion fatigue has on us. So it happens from indirect exposure to traumatic events, where you're exposed to other people's traumatic events as a result of the work you do, the care you do as a caregiver. It's different than PTSD, which is a result of being the primary person the event happened to. With secondary trauma, it is being exposed to other people's trauma. So, for example, the child in your care had a lot of trauma happen to them, but you were exposed to all of things that happened to them. You had to learn about it so that you could provide good care. So you have that framework for where their behaviors are coming from and what their story is so that you can best support them. The news is the greatest source of secondary trauma in the United States, and maybe be thinking about any others that you could be seeing as a caregiver. One example I can think of is like reading for myself. I'm a counselor in social services. I have been for 17 years. And so when I get a referral for a foster child, for example, I need to do in-home counseling with, I have to read that history of what brought them into care. And so that repeated exposure. So the secondary trauma is reading their story, reading what happened to them. And if you can think of any others, please feel free to add them to the chat. But the news is a big one. Also, just things you'll hear on the radio. So, if we look at compassion fatigue, we want to consider like the different processes that take place. One thing to consider is that someone that's called an empath, it's about 25% of the population. They're someone who highly senses and feels things to a greater degree than others, and they can be more vulnerable to compassion fatigue. Empaths tend to also be the caretakers. They tend to be those first responders. They tend to be people that move into social services because they have this deep sensing and feeling. They have this deep desire to really help and serve others. So it's not uncommon to run into a lot of us in this field. I say us because I am an empath. So what the process looks like is first we're exposed to the suffering. We have that empathic ability, that ability to sense and feel the things we're exposed to. We have a natural concern for others around us, circumstances going on. And then we have that empathetic response. And as compassion fatigue sets in, we might start to detach. We have that flat affect towards what's going on. But we can also get a sense of satisfaction from knowing that we're helping or we have an ability to help and support. And then we start to have some stress around that compassion. We start to feel anxious. So we'll talk about what it feels like in our body in a little bit. But we start to notice that take house in our body, so to speak. And then if over time we continue to have that exposure to the suffering, the things that we're being empathetic towards, then we get that compassion fatigue. And this can be over time, but it can also just be instant. Traumatic memories from your past can exacerbate that or onset it, or the traumatic memories of other situations, circumstances that the one in front of you is reminding you of. So if you have a child in your care that had a very specific type of abuse happen to them, and you've had other kids in your home in the past with similar, you might have those traumatic memories of what it was like supporting that child. And then when we have other life demands, one of the indicators of increased onset of compassion fatigue, burnout, secondary trauma is higher stressors going on in our personal lives. So the more stress we have in our personal lives, the higher the incidence of onset of compassion fatigue, burnout, secondary trauma. So that's something to pay attention to. Like, where is your stress level at already before you moved into the role of caregiver? Or and or stressors that are already present in addition to your role as caregiver. So it can be hard to identify if you have compassion fatigue and burnout. It's hard to name it. And so we want to really have a good understanding of what does it feel like in the body, because that's going to be your first clues and cues. So this is not an all-inclusive list. I would love if you shared some others in the chats, things you can think of. But things we might notice are fatigue, chronic illness. So our immune function is starting to be under stress from chronic stress. We might feel cynicism, just that glass half empty rather than glass half full mentality. Just look at things through the lens of negativity. Notice that we're really irritable or more irritable than we normally would be. There's a reduction in productivity, so a harder time focusing, staying on task, being task oriented, plugging things into the calendar might feel challenging when it shouldn't be. Feelings of hopelessness, anger, despair, and sadness, and those can absolutely all be co-occurring. It's hard for some people to conceptualize that we can have more than one emotion at a time, but humans can have multiple emotions at a time. So it can feel conflicting and confusing to have this feeling of like hopelessness, which is kind of a very like um almost tired feeling, but then like this anger that creates this big feeling at the same time. Uh, Feelings of re-experiencing the event. So your body is going back to that moment that onset the compassion fatigue, or maybe flashback memories or thoughts about it. Having sleep disturbances, and that can look like difficulty falling asleep. Maybe you fall asleep okay, but you struggle with staying asleep. Um, Having night disturbances, nightmares, waking up at a certain time every night. Oops. Trying to get to the chat. There we go. So sleep disturbances can really vary depending on the person, and they can change over time for the same person. Heightened feelings of anxiety, starting to avoid people or activities. Maybe people or activities that are specific to what onset the compassion fatigue, or maybe just people or activities in general. It can vary and change. Feeling persistent anger and sadness, having a lower libido, and for some people, just less interest in any kind of physical connection, maybe because of that irritability, or some people might notice they need more closeness, more proximity to someone else that's like a secure anchor for them. Heightened state of alertness, so maybe just more hypervigilant, looking at doors, looking for danger, looking for a way out. The startle response might be stronger. Some people get like alert fatigue almost, like that constant zinging of the phones going off, noises, things like that. And then feeling of desperation regarding work, like maybe it just feels overwhelming what didn't used to for going to work, or I would also say work relating to being a caregiver. So those parenting duties, managing a schedule, managing meals, groceries, all of the household tasks. But just the desperation, like it feels never ending, daunting, really overwhelming. Um, so while this can stem from being a caregiver, the impact can far reach outside of work into our personal lives. Having personal challenges that remind a person of a traumatic experience that onset the compassion fatigue or increase the symptoms can compound the effects and prolong the symptoms. Examples of things that can decrease someone's distress tolerance, especially while experiencing compassion fatigue or burnout, can be a change in health of a family member. And it doesn't just have to be a family member in your home, it can be a parent, a sibling, a loved one outside of the home. Just any change because you've got worry now that's going outside of the thing that caused the compassion fatigue and burnout. Death of a loved one, change in work hours or conditions, that's changing your potentially your predictability, your dependability, your financial state. So when predictability and routines start to come out of the equation or affected in a way you can't control, that can really increase the impact of compassion fatigue and burnout. Change in recreational activity. So for a lot of people, we here in Washington, we have limited daylight hours, right? And so for a lot of people, what that means is you can't get outside as much, or people enjoy gardening or, doing backpacking, things that are outside, and you're limited to that because of our weather and our shortened hours of light in the daytime. That can have a significant impact on the mental health, which exacerbates the compassion fatigue and burnout. Change in social activities. So some of those things that might get you out in the summertime, you can't do now because of the change in weather, um, or anything else that might in fact impact your ability to have that social interaction that you maybe are used to having and is a good balancing um, protective factor for you. Change in financial state. I know a lot of times for caregivers, we have to give up so much of our time. It can impact our ability to work and cut into the finances. And so that can become a huge stressor that compounds the compassion fatigue and burnout because that worry is increasing. And then change in work responsibilities. So if you have a job where the duties are increasing, but also at home, your capacity is decreasing, or the needs at home, being a caregiver is increasing, you're becoming imbalanced. And so it's starting to compound the onset. And like I mentioned before, the more we have these stressors, the more at risk we are for these things. We have less tolerance for managing the high stress and trauma exposure. So we want to also pay attention to the different types of stress because there's not all stress is the same, and we can have them both simultaneously. So we can have good stress, like a new baby, an interview for a new job, preparing for a 5K or something that is important to you, a child's first day at school, preparing for a presentation like this, planning a wedding. These can all be good stressors, right? Bad stressors or stressors that don't feel good are going to be a family death, chronic illness, financial strain, too much to do, not enough time, relationship struggles, constant changes to our environment. So, but these can all be good and bad things at the same time. So maybe a new baby is born, but the baby is born premature and is in the NICU. So yay, the baby's born, and oh no, now I'm worried about the baby's health. Or interview for a new job, got the job, but it's going to mean less pay. And so that's good stress. You're moving to a job that's going to be less stressful, but also stressful because it's going to be financial strain. So you have to weigh the mental benefit versus the financial loss. So it's not always black and white. And all of these things do contribute to our nervous system function. So, and then there's some other things that play a role while we're managing the different types of stress. Our cortisol, dopamine, serotonin all play a role in how our body handles all of the stress going on. And these are different chemicals in our body that affect our mood. So cortisol is the stress hormone. When you first wake up, exercise, face a stressful event, that's when your pituitary gland reacts and dumps the cortisol. So typically when we're waking up in the morning, it builds up throughout the night. And when our pituitary gland dumps it, it sends a signal to your adrenal glands to produce the right amount. And It works with certain parts of your brain to control your mood, motivation, your fear. If our cortisol stays balanced, our body is more likely to respond to stress in healthy ways. Cortisol also helps manage things in our bodies like our carbohydrates, our fats, our proteins, helping to keep inflammation down in our body. It helps regulate your blood pressure. It increases your blood sugar to a healthy amount if your cortisol is at a healthy amount. If you have too much cortisol, you're going to have too much blood sugar. It helps control your sleep-wake cycle. It's restoring and repairing while you're asleep. It boosts energy so you can handle stress and restores balance afterward. So it's a very important hormone in your body. And the more we're exposed to chronic stress, the more imbalance our cortisol is going to become. Uh, and we'll talk a little bit later about what that starts to look like. So then we have serotonin. It's a neurotransmitter that helps the brain and nervous system cells communicate with each other. So it has a very important job. Its main function is to stabilize your mood as well as your feelings of happiness, well-being, and too little of this can cause feelings of depression and clinical depression. So when people take um, medications for that, it's balancing out those neurotransmitters in the brain. And then dopamine is another neurotransmitter in your body. It also acts as a hormone. It's like your happy, feel pleasure, joy, reward neurotransmitter. That's what your body gets when you do things that, like when you give someone a hug, when you're intimate with someone, when you smell a new baby, if that's something that smells good to you, when you run, when you work in your garden, things that really feel good to you, that's giving you that dopamine dump. And so all of these different things are really important with maintaining balance and maintaining, helping manage the stress in a positive way. So one thing we want to think about is kids that come into care who have been abused or neglected, most likely are coming from traumatic homes. They've been exposed to experience a lot of trauma, and often over longer periods of time. So something to think about is how would that affect their dopamine? Probably on the lower side, right? And then how might that affect their function? So if someone isn't getting enough dopamine in their environment, they might be seeking things that give them that dopamine dump in a negative or positive way, and also may present as a child that's more depressed, unstable, things like that. So then we want to look at what does it feel like in our body. So that's how it's affecting our brain function in a very general sense. What does it feel like in the body? So when we are being exposed to high stress, chronic stress, we may exhibit headaches, butterflies in the stomach, tension in the neck, tension in the pain in the cervix for women, having sweaty palms, racing heart, dizzy or lightheadedness, and that can kind of come and go, agitated, having a clenched jaw, not sleeping well, tired all the time. And these are things that I have often heard foster kids, kids in care mention having indicators of here or there, or sometimes certain parts of the day. These are really good indicators to our body that our nervous system is not happy. Something's going on. It's our body's way of telling us we're activated some way, somehow, that we're not feeling safe. Um, if you want, you can share in the chat any type of other symptoms you can think of. This is certainly not an all-inclusive list. There's a lot of different experiences that people have. If we look at this woman right here and we think about what different symptoms is she exhibiting? If she is constantly holding a kiddo and she's always on the phone and she's trying to juggle all the household chores, She might start to feel lower back pain, which we can get from stress, but also just that load of the housework. She might be getting headaches. She could be feeling tired. This person looks like she has some kind of headache, maybe in the temples. Um, this person also looks like he could potentially be having a headache, just feeling overwhelmed. Someone mentioned shortness of breath. Yeah, that's a really common one. Absolutely. People will describe like feeling like an elephant is on their chest, or just they're taking really shallow breaths, or they're just noticing they're doing a lot of ah, like deep sighs a lot of the time. Some people can feel like cold. That fight or flight feeling is starting to activate, and so it's making their body do little shivers. They're getting goosebumps, and so they may start to feel cold. Some people will get hot flashes, just totally flushed. Um, and I would love it if everybody could right now just do a check-in, do a scan of your body, starting at the top of your head, moving down to your face, paying attention to your neck, your shoulders, your chest, maybe even like press on your chest a little bit around your collarbone and right below it. Feel into your shoulders, all the way down your arms and your hands. Maybe flex all your fingers. Pay attention to your torso, your lower back, your belly, your hips, your thighs, your quads, your knees, calves, shins, bottom of your feet, your heels. Just scan your whole body and be feeling for, do you feel any stress right now? And how would you know it if we do? There is a direct correlation between what you feel in your body and the emotion that relates to that. And that's what we call the somatic response. So every single emotion we have shows up in our body, and part of having emotional intelligence is the ability to connect with where we're feeling it in our body, and that's giving us clues and cues about what our emotions are doing. Someone mentioned their back. They can feel something in their back. Yeah, a lot of times, like if you press your shoulders down, you can really feel where that tightness is in your back. A lot of people unintentionally clench their jaw, and so trying to be conscious of having your tongue between your top and bottom teeth can be a way to loosen that up. Someone mentioned they feel their shoulders. Yeah, maybe tightness in your shoulders, always headaches. Yeah, headaches are a really common one. And different parts of your head. Some people feel it in the front, some people in the temple, somewhere in the back, like a tension headache in the back into the neck and shoulders. Um, so becoming aware of where in the body, where that what emotion that anchors can be really helpful. So if someone's feeling a lot of anger, that's the root word, and then here's all of the words attached to that. Then here's some different things that can look like and feel like in the body. So if you do a lot of teeth clenching, that could be associated with anger or with sad. Just feeling heaviness in your body can be related to sadness, feeling depressed, lonely. Um, Doing a lot of eye rolls, like this isn't one that would be necessarily obvious to me, but that could be connected to sadness. Feeling jumpy related to surprise. Um, Eyebrows up, like constantly just like shocked, like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. That can be surprise. A racing heart, rooted in fear. That one's not too surprising. So yeah, paying attention to the body and then what emotion is that attached to? And then connecting that emotion to the event that was the onset of it. So this is how we're starting to check in with our body to identify like where are we at with the compassion fatigue, the burnout. Are we starting to notice that we're having those body sensations all the time? And then thinking back to, okay, when do I think this started? What was the trigger? What was the initial event? Trying to map it out. And then we want to talk about what is it doing internally, because we can't always see how the stress is affecting our body. So chronic stress can increase chances of cardiac event. So that can be high blood pressure, that can be cardiac arrest, that can be, um, yeah, things like that. It can cause increased cortisol levels in the body, which can lead to weight gain, predominantly in the belly area. Like I said before, if we have too much cortisol in our body, then we start to produce more sugar and also crave more sugar. And so that's where it starts to build up from that cortisol dump happening all the time. Chronic stress can also lead to hair loss. Women are going to notice this more than men, not because it happens to men less, but with longer hair, which women tend to have more than men. It's just easier to notice. Uh, it can lower your immune function, so just getting sick more often. It can impact your sleep, which has its own list of negative effects. It can lead to or worsen mood disorders. So if you're already predisposed to mood disorders, you had them before, or you have a family history of them, then when we're under chronic stress and when we have compassion fatigue, burnout, secondary trauma, compromising our system all the time, then it can exacerbate or onset some mood disorders. So then all of those symptoms we talked about before, some of them are going to become actually more exaggerated. So then we're dealing with mood disorders in addition to the secondary trauma, compassion fatigue. Okay. Luann, did you send out the self-care assessment?
I was just looking at it now. Put it in the chat.
Okay. Oh, that's handy. I always forget we can do that. Thank you. So I'm going to pull it up, but Luann's going to add in the chat section a self-care assessment that we're going to look at together. It's divided up into 6 categories. If you've heard of the wellness wheel, it's very similar categories of physical, psychological, emotional, spiritual, relationship, and work. Um, so I'm going to pull it up here. This
Actually,
is
it's
a
not
really,
letting me put it in the chat. I'm sorry. So I'm going to email it, all the handouts to everybody right now.
okay. Uh, so this is a really good tool for looking at where are you at with um, things to do to take care of yourself to offset stress. And so we're rating it from a scale of 3 to 0. I do this well, which means frequently. 2 is you're okay, occasionally. 1 is I barely or rarely. 0 is I never do it. So with physical self-care, um, here's all the different things. How often are you doing these things? The pattern that I typically see is people will have categories that they tend to have strengths in, and then categories that are very deficit. Sometimes I'll see some people who just kind of pepper a little bit throughout, but there's typically like areas people are better at than others. So there's physical, psychological, let you read through those. Oh, someone was able to draw on it. My computer doesn't let me do that. I don't know how you can do that. Luann's like, yeah, me either. Okay, and then there's emotional self-care. When you get the document, you can type into it. I don't know about drawing on it. Spiritual self-care. These are the different areas here. And spiritual doesn't have to equate to religious. Those can be very different things. Like you'll see here, like open to inspiration, cherish optimism and hope, being aware of non-material aspects of life. There are some more religious components here, but not entirely. Relationship self-care. And then workplace or professional self-care. So, um, and then we add up our score and we identify what areas we have the highest numbers and then what areas we have deficits, and that gives us a good clue of what areas we need to build in moving forward, and we'll talk about how to do that. So, okay, so we get those areas, keep them in mind. We're going to come back to that. Um, So we want to reflect on how can being a caregiver affect your stress levels, and where the stress is occurring might also be a reason why you're having certain deficits in those different categories based on what the stressors, challenges are associated with being a caregiver. So, um, having a child in your care can very much affect this balance, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which says that our physiological needs, our most basic needs of breathing, food, water, shelter, clothing, like that's our basic needs. Kids that come into our care oftentimes do not have these basic needs met. And so uh they might have a lot of needs just around these needs. The kids that are food insecure, the kids that do food hoarding, the kids that really struggle with having a sleep schedule because they've never had one before, um, which can then impact us in these areas. And then we've got safety and security, our health, our employment, having stable housing, family, having a stable social support system. Um, Oftentimes, when we have kids in our care, this right here is largely impacted because we oftentimes have to call out of work because they have things going on at school. We have to go pick them up, or they're chronically sick because they've been under constant trauma and stress. And so we're having to stay home with them. Maybe they're jeopardizing our housing because of their behaviors. Maybe we have a kid in our care that's like a registered sex offender. We're very limited to where we can live. Maybe we have certain family members that we can't be around because of their behaviors. So when you're a caregiver, these areas aren't, it's not just you, like their hierarchy of needs impacts our function, right? The next area, love and belonging, friendships, family, intimacy, sense of connection, um, self-esteem, our confidence, achievement, respect of others, the needs to be a unique individual. And then when we're at self-actualization, when we're fully fulfilled in all these areas, we're going to have high morality, feel high creativity, spontaneity, feel accepted by ourselves and others, experience a sense of purpose, meaning, and inner potential. So, um, it is a very unique relationship and circumstance when you are a foster parent, a caregiver of kids who are taken out of their parents' care, because a lot of these areas become so symbiotic because of the trauma they've come from. And we see that a lot more in foster homes than we would in all biological homes. And so this helps answer this question of how can being a caregiver affect your stress levels? Because if you were functioning pretty high and then this child came into your care and their function was very low in these areas, and then it bleeds into our function because now we have to very deeply dive into meeting those needs. And it's very fulfilling work, and it is there's so much love there, and there's so much reward, and also a lot of stress that comes with that. So, um, so it's helpful to look at this though and think like, what areas are you feeling deficits, and are you feeling like you need replenished in? It's important to be aware of that. Um, One more thing I want to mention about this. One thing that is common with caregivers is that the child's needs come first. And so I want you to be focusing on what are your needs, because we want to be able to separate ourselves from the child's needs, which can be very difficult to do. Um, but the purpose of tonight is to really focus on what your needs are so that you can support yourselves with compassion fatigue, secondary trauma, burnout, those kinds of things. Okay, the next handout we're going to look at, and I'll pull it up in a minute, is weighing our stressors versus our resourcing list. So our stressors are the things that are negatively affecting your function with real-time effects. They're affecting you mentally, physically, psychologically, financially, and or emotionally. Resourcing is the things we want to do to offset that stress. So this is how we're going to specifically target the compassion fatigue and burnout systematically, and that is how we create change when we're going through this, is you have to learn to be very, very intentional about doing these things for yourself to bring yourself out of that compassion fatigue and burnout. Your resourcing list should be bigger than the stressors list. The longer your stressors list is, the more resourcing you need to do to offset the negative effects of the stressor. So to make this achievable, we're going to think of small things throughout the day we can do, focusing on the mind, body, soul, and sustainable support for psychological care. And we're going to talk about how to do that. So I'm going to pull mine up. Um, there we go. All right. So stressors are things that cause stress in our lives. Resourcing yourself means things you do throughout the day to negate the effects of the stressors. This is not something you do for your kids, your partner, the home. These are things you're going to be doing just for yourself. As I mentioned, the bigger the stressor, the more we need over here on the resourcing list. So let's say a stressor is um, child's IEP. And I know what that means. That means you likely need to do lots of accommodation follow-ups. That likely means you often, oops, hear from teachers about poor behavior, grades, interactions with others, whatever. It means more meetings at the school, which can mean time away from work. It can mean more financial drain because maybe they need other services that the school can't provide. I mean, an IEP can mean a lot more than just an IEP, right? So, um, and let's say a lost job, and let's say that means struggling to pay for Christmas gifts. So then these are pretty big things. So we're going to want to come up with lists longer than the stressor lists. Okay. Um, and you're going to use this form, this like almost like a template. This is going to be your blueprint for your plan. So coming back to our slides. So you want to think of this as a plan, like an IEP plan or a 504 or performance improvement plan or a birth plan. If you have experience with any of these, you know it's well mapped out, it's well drawn out, it's planned ahead. So ideally, you actually have a plan for before you get that secondary trauma, that compassion fatigue. You have an idea of a go-to list of things to offset that stress. And if not, we're going to come up with one tonight. But you really want to look at it like these plans. Like it's an agreement with yourself of, okay, when I'm feeling those feelings we went over before, and you can relate it to a specific event, specific things you heard, specific things you're exposed to. That's your series of clues to let you know, okay, it's time to really activate into my plan of taking care of myself, doing a lot of resourcing. So here's the fun part. We're going to come up with our list. So with each of these things, I want you to be thinking about which category would fit into for you, mind, body, soul. Um, and you can also think of that assessment we did, those 6 different categories, like which ones, if you know, you should know now which areas you tend to be deficit in. Here's some ideas for um, coming up with ideas for those categories. And so for your assessment, the sections you're deficient in, be looking for which ones sound appealing to you. So for some people, I've mentioned gardening a few times, having plants in your home, just something that you can look at, doesn't require a lot of energy or output, but brings you some joy. This is a picture of some cranberries I canned. I used to do a lot of canning with my grandmother growing up, and I had canned some cranberries to make cranberry juice. And so that's something that is very like relaxing to me. It brings back a lot of positive memories. You're going to want to have several things in each category based on your energy level and your time. So I am certainly not going to always have the time or even the financial resources necessarily to go canning some cranberry juice. It takes a lot of time. So that would be something that for me would fit into if I look at the mind, body, spirit, that's spirit, because that's almost like meditative for me. It goes back to memories that are rooted in my childhood. That's something I would need a whole afternoon for when I have time and resources. Going for a walk outside, that could be body, because you're moving your body. That could also be soul, because you're connecting to yourself, maybe doing some prayer while you're doing your walking. You're putting things in there with intention, though. I love this picture because it's like quintessential Pacific Northwest. Like in the winter, there's lots of wetness and moss out. Um, Doing little self-care things like putting eye patches on or doing those little face rollers, just doing things, but not for like any reason, but taking that time for yourself. So you're having that mindfulness around it, that thought of, I'm going to do this thing for myself. So this would be like maybe body. That's something that's only going to take a couple minutes that I can do while I'm sitting and drinking some tea or something. Talking to a close friend, doing some meditation or some type of like aromatherapy, like lighting incense that has an uplifting effect to your mood. It looks like this person might also be meditating or doing yoga. Taking supplements. A lot of times supplements, vitamins, they can feel like cumbersome. But really focusing on your body. Like I am doing this to support my cardiovascular health. I am taking a supplement to support my immune system. Like you're being very mindful with your thoughts when you're doing these things. You're thinking about what you're doing to serve and support your body. So it's really a mind shift of not just like, oh, I have to take these. It's what are you doing to support your body? Prayer, art, painting, making healthy things for yourself. So again, like you're not just making yourself a smoothie, you're having conscious thoughts around, I'm doing this to nourish my body, I'm building my energy, I'm taking care of my immune system, my immune function. I know that whole foods are really good for me. So you're really creating a lot of positive language as you're doing these different things. So if we think about timing, And then like exercise. This is something you could, 10 minutes, 3 hours, whatever. The timing can be different for each of them. Listening to a podcast that's inspiring to you. Some people like listening to thrillers, something that'll just distract them. Some people love listening to, um, things about psychology and behaviors to better understand themselves or their child or their circumstances. Some people enjoy listening to like comedy. Some people enjoy romance. Like whatever is going to be good for you to offset that stress, um, is going to be, and that could change, right? So having a selection, spending time outside with a pet can be very grounding. Reading a book, seeing a mental health therapist, or maybe a psychiatrist, someone that can prescribe some medications to offset the stress. Um, This one, I was thinking of like chakras, just like different belief systems around meditation and having a spiritual connection to self, doing self-care, like little masks. I like to make stuff for myself. So this was like a silly little mask thing I had made out of like coffee grounds, I think. But the intention was just to spend some time with myself for myself. I'm going to do body work, like craniosacral work or Reiki or massage, anything like that. Maybe going like shopping, getting something nice for yourself. Also, when I look at this one, I think of like saying positive affirmations when you're looking in the mirror, when you're talking to yourself. Um, but we really want to pull from a lot of different things to help offset the stress. So going back to our assessment we had looked at. Um, I like the idea of writing in your own, but you could also just highlight on here like which ones that you want to focus on. However you want to do it, tape it up on a mirror. You're going to tape this up somewhere to really keep it in your mind's eye to come back to it because our minds, they go to what we're used to doing. And if we're not used to doing something, we're just going to skip over it no matter what our best intentions are. So having it out somewhere to remind you of like, oh yeah, I want to do that thing. Okay, I'm noticing my body is dysregulated right now. Which thing from this list can I pull from right now to help offset the stress I'm feeling in my body? Paying attention to your body is going to be your clue and your cues to let you know which things are working, which times. So if you're really activated, for some people, like heavy body movement, jumping, shaking your hands, moving your body around, that can be really helpful for some people. Others might, and for certain circumstances, to help deactivate. Other times, if you're super activated, you might just need to rest. You might need to do a calming activity, light the incense, lay with some candles, listen to a book. Um, Paying attention to how your body is responding is going to clue and cue you into when to do what. And then, of course, which can fit in based on your time, your circumstances, all of that. I want to really validate that I recognize that this is not easy to just build these things into your life because having kids is a lot of work and it's hard to build this stuff in. So I want to validate that and normalize that. And this is like building any muscle. Like it'll get stronger the more you do it. You're going to find that the more you do it, the easier you can go to that list and it becomes almost like a mental checklist. If anyone has ever had babies, you develop this mental checklist of did I change their diaper? Have they had a bottle? Have they eaten? Um, do they need to be held? Do they need a nap? You go through that mental checklist, and as you practice this enough times, you get to that same space where you have a checklist of the different things to go to based on how your body is feeling. But it takes a lot of work, and it'll change over time too. So when we're under chronic stress, which tends to be the case as caregivers and parents in general, We want to always be implementing these things. And when we're under compassion fatigue, secondary trauma, our body is giving us those clues that, like, we are really deactivated right now. Our body is not happy. We really need to increase the resourcing to offset the stress effects that's happening to us. Um, One way that I like to encourage people to look at it is almost like you're sick. You know, when you're sick, you will take time to take care of yourself. And when you're in compassion fatigue and burnout, it's like your nervous system is sick. It really needs to be nourished and taken care of the same way as if you were to have the cold or the flu. So, like I was mentioning before, your mindset matters, using your resourcing tools with intentions. Um, Also, the difference between self-soothing and self-care is your intention behind it. So, self-soothing is something that you're going to do in that moment to help re-regulate yourself. So, taking a bath, that's soothing yourself right away. Versus self-care is something you do long term over the course of days, weeks, and months. It becomes a habit. Self-soothing is really good when you're in that very activated state. It's things you know are going to help right now, like having a cup of tea, going for a walk, having a bath, talking to a friend. You need to do those self-soothing things, but also have those built-in long-term self-care things. Be sure to not use them all at once. Be intentional about using small, achievable resourcing things throughout the day. So maybe in the morning you do your little eye patches, you take some time for yourself to do that, and you listen to a podcast. And then in the middle of the day, you have a really healthy lunch and you're focusing on like how you're taking care of your body, you're nourishing it. And then at the end of the day, you talk to a friend while you're driving home from work to just, feel supported around something going on. So like you're intentionally building things throughout the day. Thinking about what part of you are you resourcing, mind, body, soul, or more than one area at once. What will work one day may not the next, and expect that, and that's totally okay. We may feel really lethargic and just like defeated one day, and so we need a lot of those more down activities. And then maybe another day we're really angry and we feel really activated and we need to do something more intense. That's okay. If you are a creature of habit, if you're familiar with the Myers-Briggs personality test, this is going to be those who are a very strong J, the last of the four letters in Myers-Briggs. You are someone who tends to thrive on routine and predictability more than anyone else. And so it may feel more comforting to you to just know that, like, I'm drinking that green smoothie every single morning for my taking care of my body. And I am, going for a walk every single day after work, no matter what. That's fine too, but also pay attention to what your body is needing. When you're using your self-care resources, be sure to use kind language with yourself. I'm drinking the smoothie to help nourish my body because it does such a great job taking care of me. We really want to praise the process, not perfection. Um, it can be really easy to think, I only, did this like 3 times this week, or I only focused on this twice this week. We have to build up to this. You can't just overnight, boom, build this into your system. It takes intention and time. And if you're already exhausted and super stressed, then it's going to feel like work to add this stuff in. And our brains are amazing things. We have what's called neuroplasticity, which is where we can retrain the way our brain thinks and our thought patterns. And so I know based on science that we can get to a place where we can work this more and more into our schedules, no matter how busy they are. Someone asked if you can go back and watch the replay. Yes, this is being recorded and she'll have it posted on the Alliance website, I think, although I noticed it's changed recently.
Yes, it will be posted on the website.
Here is a tool that's helpful for building these things into your day. It's called habit stacking. So, and this helps. We want to reflect on what areas of our Maslow's hierarchy of needs are we wanting to build. Um, this is how we can implement new habits into our day based on what we're already doing. So if you're brushing your teeth every morning, then you can be listening to a podcast while you're doing that, while you're getting ready, brushing your teeth, getting dressed, brushing your hair, all those things. Um, the first hour you're awake is when your brain has the most neuroplasticity. And so I like to listen to, I just pull something up on YouTube, positive affirmations. There's like 5 minute ones, 11 minute ones, 20 minute ones. Um, there's positive affirmations for gratitude, positive affirmations for self-care, positive affirmations for any topic you want. So that's something that I like to do as I'm getting ready in the morning because I know it's having that positive effect on my brain and I have to do literally nothing except remember to do it. So, and then maybe while you're brushing your teeth and getting ready, you have your little eye patches on, and maybe you put a diffuser on with some incense or not incense, this is essential oil that you know is uplifting, like citrus oils. And so you have built off of just your morning getting ready routine, you have now added in a few things that are resources to help offset the stress. So that's an example of habit stacking. So maybe the first couple weeks you just add this in, and then that becomes a routine. And then you add in, I'm going to light the diffuser every morning with some uplifting essential oils. You get that going, and then you get your podcast going. Like this is how you create change that feels possible. If anyone has any questions or comments about that, I'd love to hear it. Um, when do you want to reach out for professional help? So if you're starting to notice that you're numbing out more often than not or disassociating throughout the day, that's an indicator to reach out and talk to someone. And numbing out can be just indifference towards things that you know normally would really affect you. Or just kind of a general, like, I don't care. I don't care what happens. I don't care. And it doesn't always happen with others. It's like it's with you. I don't care that I'm not getting sleep. I don't care that I'm not getting good quality food. I don't care that my needs aren't being met. It's just this lack of care for things that should be important. And then disassociating throughout the day. So just kind of checking out, not being fully present. Um, that's sign for concern. When you have little to no desire to do the things you know that you would normally enjoy, you enjoyed before, just lost interest in things for yourself, that's another clue. When intrusive thoughts or feelings are getting in the way of having good hygiene habits and affecting your relationships, so if doing things like taking a shower, brushing your teeth is starting to feel like a lot of work, um, if you're not connecting to your partner or your kids the way that you normally would, you just are becoming more secluded. These are more indicators. When you're having thoughts of harming yourself or others, that's an immediate need to seek help. When you feel isolated, alone, and like you have no one to talk to. Also, just like another one is increased irritability and weepiness to the point where it's become a routine that you have no control over. It's healthy to cry, it's normal to get irritated, but when it's becoming a normal pattern all the time and you can't seem to control it, and avoidance of things that not that you normally would enjoy, but also avoidance of things that you used to be able to tolerate. So, as a counselor who's worked in social services for a very long time, I know when I'm having compassion fatigue or burnout because I'll notice I'll be avoidant of certain types of meetings. I will be avoidant of reading the referrals. I will be avoidant of opening my work email. Like there's things that normally I could do without skipping a beat that I start to notice over weeks. And honestly, sometimes months even, it'll take me to realize, oh, I really don't want to do that. And that desire to not do that thing is increasing and increasing and increasing to the point where I'm having like high anxiety even thinking about having to go to another FTDM because of that one that I had 3 months ago that was so awful. And so you start to notice, and it can take a while to really pick up on that, even as someone who's highly skilled in this, highly trained in it. I've experienced it myself several times over the years. There's been times I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, how did I miss that? We've been we've been dealing with this for 3 months. How did I miss it? But it can be easy to kind of explain away the signs or just think, oh, this is temporary. But when it's starting to impact function and it's not going away, that's when it's time to get some help. And if those resourcing things are not offsetting the stress, I would say like after a month. Um, Actually, I'm gonna go back. So, and reaching out for professional help, some different ideas for that is going to be talking to one of the specialists at the Alliance. That's always a great place you can start, reaching out to one of them. Um, Talking to a mental health professional. Sometimes I almost recommend like finding a mental health professional that specializes in first responders can be helpful for caregivers depending on the level of trauma you've been exposed to, like what kind of kid you've had in your home, what kind of things you've been exposed to because of their trauma history. Sometimes having a therapist that specializes in first responders can be a better fit because they have been exposed to the unusual things that come with this kind of with social services. It's a very specific thing, child abuse and neglect. It's not for everyone. I've talked with therapists for myself. I share my work and they, you know, fall into a basket of tears. I'm like, oh, okay, I can't talk about this here. So that's something to consider when looking for a counselor. Other thoughts for looking for professional help, depending on what your preferences are, going to a naturopath and talking about some supplements or some great supplements that can support and help offset stress and support the nervous system. Um, Going to a primary care physician and talking about some potential medications that can help. Um, those are some first steps. Also, I think the foster, the different caregiver support groups is a really great place to start talking to people and getting ideas. Um, okay, so our discussion questions. What is one thing that was surprising to you in this presentation?
Would you like me to turn the recording off now?
Yeah, let's do that. Thank you.